Hey guys, and welcome back to Let's Paint. So, as you guys saw on the tag, I am going to be teaching you guys how to do a spotlight slash halo eye, which is basically trying to focus like the shimmer or glitter effects or the lightest colors on the center of the lids while keeping sort of the dark colors around it so that the attention is mostly focused on the lid itself. And I am using a new camera that my grandmother had given me a while back, which I can't believe I didn't even think about using. So now it's attached to the mirror to where now if I do my lips and everything, I can actually show you how I do it instead of being off camera like I've been criticized a little bit. So to first start off, as usual, I'm going to be going in with my Rose Primer Serum from Wet n Wild. And around my T-zone, I'm going to be using the One Heck of a Blot Foundation Primer by Soap and Glory for my oily nose and forehead section. And using a Real Techniques buffing brush, which you can get at Walgreens for I think about maybe $8. I suck at trying to remember prices, but I do know we sell this brush. It's just got a new look to it. So just taking a little bit of that rose primer on the brush. And we're just going to start buffing that into the skin right away. Now, as I said before, rose primer is generally good for evening out the skin tones because rose itself has a like a natural ailment to helping out with evening out the skin tones. And to me, it works wonderfully to help buff out the makeup a little bit better and smoothly. Generally, like if you don't have any issues with like your skin under your foundation or anything, I would say a rose primer would be generally a good one to start with, especially as a basic primer. Now, this is part of the Rebel Rose collection from Wet n Wild, so they do still sell it online, even though I got this at my store when the collection first came out. But it's really good in my personal opinion. So now we're going to go in with the One Heck of a Blot Foundation Primer. And we're just going to distribute this along my nose, under my eyes, my forehead, just basically where the oil levels are the most on my face. Because when you have really oily skin, it can distribute or I want to say basically like it breaks the makeup apart because it seeps through the foundation and everything. And once you're all set and done, by the end of the day, you're going to notice like the splotchiness, the uneven tones, and everything just starts breaking apart and it could look like a mess. And since the springtime is now finally starting to come back into Oklahoma here, then my oil levels are starting to act up because of the changing conditions. Okay, so now we have the face primed. I generally wait about 30 seconds before putting any foundation on my face because the primer is still wet and you want it to really settle into the skin before you start applying any product. So I'm going to be going in with my two usuals, my Rimmel Lasting Finish 25-Hour Breathable Longwear Foundation in the shade 101 Classic Ivory, and my Revlon Photo Ready Candid Foundation in the shade 130 Ivory. Since I ran out of my Infallible Fresh from L'Oreal, which was a really, good coverage foundation, I had to find something that was on the, in essence, cheaper side. And since these were both on great deals at Walgreens, remember that Walgreens has a lot of good deals, I had to settle for these two, and they both have a medium coverage, which when put together, they both have a really good full coverage. And I probably know what you're thinking. He's not starting with his eyes today? What is this? But yes, this time I'm going to show you how I used to do my makeup back when I was working at Walmart and just the usual way I would do it. Because this particular look doesn't require to have such a structured eye or eyeliner. And what I love about this foundation is it's got its own applique, which makes it spreading out so much better. And taking this e.l.f. buffing brush that is from the Naturally Neutral or Natural brush. It's basically a big synthetic blending brush that I love using to distribute my foundation since it has such a fat brush head. And this foundation is great as a medium coverage alone, but like I said, I prefer a full coverage to make sure all my bases are covered, because even when I shave, and even if I color correct, there's still something left around my neck zone because of the hair, which I'm hoping to find a way to get rid of soon. And it'll kind of cover it up. Like right now, it's a very dull gray still. Even I could see it, but I don't know if anyone else could, but... And then we're going to do the forehead. And when you're doing your foundations, you want to be sure that you're not dragging it all over the place, even though I technically am. But if you do it enough to where you can't see any of the streaks or lines, then you're good. But generally, you want to be sure that you're stippling your foundation in place and not just like dragging it and spreading it, because then it's going to leave a lot of streaks and it could be noticeable under makeup or anything else once you set it. Then we're just taking a Candid, making sure we got it all over and just blending it into the Rimmel. Making sure she's all evened out before I start moving on to my concealing and highlighting. All right, now we're going to go on to highlighting, which I use my go-to Infallible Fresh Full Wear in the shade 320 Porcelain. And for today, I'm going to give you guys a treat. I'm going to be blending it out with our Walgreens Charcoal Infused Beauty Blender. And of course, it's already damped, so it's a little soaked. And then you wring it out. So we're just going to start putting this on the under eye. And like I've said before in a lot of other videos, that you don't want to do concealer under foundation because it can cake up under the eye. And when you do it on top of foundation, it can blend itself down, because this porcelain, as you can see, is almost like stark white. But once you start blending it into the foundation, it really becomes a seamless coloring. And just patting that concealer in. See? Beautifully blended. Now with like what drag queens do when they use like the Krylon TV sticks, they use 3 different colors for their neutral base, their highlighting, and their contouring. And they do it in 3 different sections because when they do it on the skin by themselves, the colors sort of stay a little more true to how they are. Because they want it to show better on stage. That's why in a lot of drag queen videos you see them using the 3-step rule or the 3-toned rule because of making sure that the colors show up more, especially on stage, because stage lights can wash out about a good 40% of the colors you put on your face. So that's why they have such extreme featurettes, because you want to be sure that it reads well on stage. To whereas what I do, like with that stark white, once it's blended into the foundation, it actually looks a lot more like a buff beige sort of color. So now I'm going to go in with my contour color and using a this Real Techniques mini buffing brush or multitask. Oh, there it is. Expert face brush. I'm going to be taking the color 390 Cedar, which is part of the Infallible Full Wear. Unfortunately, this was a color that we don't carry at the store because it was a non-basic item. But basically, you just want to find a shade that's at least 2 ranges darker than your skin tone. And we're just going to define that cheek a little. And then taking the butt end of the sponge, I want to be sure that all this is blended, but I want to keep the cheek line really defined because I kind of like it where it's like a crisp cheek. So that way you can see it a little bit more. And I swear by this product, all it takes is 2 little drops like this to really define and contour this cheek line. Just also contouring my forehead. And before we powder everything down, I will do my brows as well, because I want to be sure that my brows are set in place before doing the eyeshadow. And then we're also going to do our nose contour by using my go-to contour brush, which is just a regular sort of flat-edged contouring brush. And using a little bit of the True Match or the True Blend Fix-It Stick from CoverGirl in the shade D5, 6, and 7, which I'm sure is a discontinued item, but basically I use a contour stick to do my nose and then using this tool to blend it out. just like so. And then we use this to just and I'm also going to sort of pull it up here to defy that brow bone to basically show where my false crease is going to start. Could also take kind of like so. And to make sure that the nose contour or nose highlight is nice and defined, I would be taking, sorry, I think I have a big enough collection. This Walgreens foundation brush that has some of the concealer product on it. That way the attention shows in the nose a little bit more. Now we're going to do the brows. And I'll show you how I do my brows without the guideline of my eyeshadow. So I'm going to be taking this this L'Oreal Brow Gel in the shade Deep Brunette, so it's 215. And it's just a brow gel pot. You could find these in almost every brand. And if not, even like a dark brown gel eyeliner could work. And I just sort of follow the natural brow bone, at least the upper part of it, and that's where my lower end starts. And the best thing about doing your brows while your foundation is wet is that you could always go back over with that foundation or concealer and it will clean it up a little bit. This is how I used to do my makeup when I was back at Walmart. Like I would do my foundations, conceals, and brows first and powder everything down. And then during lunch, I would do the rest, like my eye shadows and highlights and everything else. There we go. And generally, yeah, brows can tend to be the hardest thing to do. But since I do a lot of drawing, it's kind of easier on my end. And I'm just diffusing these ends because My favorite brows are the kind that kind of fade and blend out. That blend in the beginning and get really thicker in the end. Making sure everything's all blended out before I powder it down, because once it's powdered, that's where it sticks. Good enough. So I'm going in with my Coty Airspun in the shade Naturally Neutral, and then I'm going to be using a Wet n Wild blush brush because it's just a bigger range or bigger fathead brush that can get a little bit more coverage in. And just stippling it onto the face because we want to be sure it's pressed in so everything is both set in place, and then just slowly blurring it and blending it. That's the best thing about this powder, is that it blurs, it blends out the lines a little and sort of dulls down the harshness of the contour. Even though it is a talc-based powder, I still say it's one of the best ones I've ever used to set my face with. And it gets the job done, and it's not expensive to where it's going to cost me an arm and a leg to set this all down with. And it doesn't have to necessarily be Coty. It could be a pressed foundation powder or a translucent powder, basically. But to me, this is one of the best ones because, especially with the extra translucent, it has a wider coverage. And then I'm just going to take this CoverGirl blush brush to wipe off any excess because it's got such a wide range. And it just kind of helps blend anything else in. All right. Now on to powder contours and highlights before starting on the eyes. Now, with this, I'm actually going to try a few different techniques to kind of give it a more in-depth look without having to rely on a bronzer. But we're still going to use a bronzer to kind of touch it up and soften it. But so to start off, I'm going to be taking this e.l.f. contouring brush in this Bronze Booster by Physicians Formula, and we're going to take this dark shade and use that on the cheeks because we want to keep the dark back here and just slowly blend it along that cheek line so it gives a little more in-depth on the cheekbone. And just little swirl motions. Something fell out, as usual. All right, and then onto the other cheek. And just sort of using whatever's left on the brush on the forehead. And then what we're going to do is take my bronzing brush from Sleek and a little bit of bronzer from e.l.f. to kind of soften that contour just a tad. The difference between a contour and a bronzer is is supposed to give a more sun-kissed glow to the cheek. And you could also use it to soften the contour on your cheeks as well. And now I'm going to be taking this face sculpting brush from e.l.f. and taking that ashy sort of brown shade on the center of this booster palette and use that to contour my nose instead of using a bronzer, because most bronzers have a little bit of a shimmer in it to give it that sort of sun-kissed glow. We want something that's a little bit more mattifying. We're also going to just drag it along the eye socket a little to define that false crease that we're going to use later. See, just like that, it defined that nose a little bit more, to whereas usually my bronzer that I use kind of leaves it a little too shiny. It doesn't show a lot of definition. Now we're going to go in with some blushes. Well, actually, what I'm going to do is touch at the bottom of this cheek using this highlight color, which is just a matte, sort of beige sort of tone, and using this powder brush, or angle powder brush from Sleek. Taking that shade. And that just helps to clean up that under cheek a little bit. Oh, wow. I almost forgot to do my jawline. This is where I would just use a bronzer, because with the jawline, you don't want to look like that you're giving yourself a beard line. We just want to soften and feminize that jawline a little bit more. Because with a woman's face, it's a little bit more rounded, a little more petite. Same thing with like the forehead and such. Now with blush, I'm going to try another little experiment by taking this super raspberry tone blush from this Revlon Sunset on Pluto cheek palette that was part of the little Stargazer collection, and taking this another e.l.f. brush. I think this is the powder brush, and we're going to take it and swirl this darker color just towards the back of the cheeks and lightly distribute it using a another e.l.f. Blending brush that I generally use for blushes, wherever it has disappeared to. Here it is. And we're just going to lightly drag that along that contour line. Because generally this palette's kind of more for the darker skin tones. Kind of like that, where you just want to keep it towards the back, because then what we will do is take a lighter blush and sort of go over it. This is basically just sort of building up that defined cheek line. So now we're just going to take my usual angled blush brush from Walgreens and taking my CoverGirl Insta to Cheekbone Cheekers palette, and I believe this is like the rose or the peachy tone one, because I lost the label on it, so I really don't know which one it is. And it's just slowly working that onto the cheek, all three colors. And then taking whatever's left and doing the forehead. And then what I will do is take my blush brush from Sleek and just slowly work it out a little. And now to do these brows, I'm going to be taking my traditional shade Made in Mocha from Maybelline and taking the angled eyeliner or brow brush from Wet n Wild, from e.l.f. Normally you could use like a cup of water or even eye drop solution to do this because it would wet the product down. I'm just going over that brow because once I set it, it's going to help blur out the center portion of my brows. One thing I hate about doing this with the powder is that it has a lot of fallout. So far, so good. And then we will take that same powder brush that has the highlight tone and actually use a more neutral tone, which will be this Rimmel Stay Matte powder in the shade 12 Buff Beige. I'm just going to pack this along the under eye. And I want the center of the forehead. And then taking my e.l.f. contour brush, which is the powder fluffier brush, taking that same powder and putting it down the bridge of my nose just to draw out the highlight. All right. Now we're going to start setting the under eyes and everything with my natural or my translucent extra coverage from Airspun. This will help kind of cut the cheek and at the same time define it a little bit more. stuff is very loose and powder, so all it takes is one mishap and you got yourself like a smoke cloud. And just to touch up the blush a little, I'm going to use this Fit Me blush in the shade Rose. I believe it's 30. And taking that same blush brush. And then just taking a light fluffy brush and brushing out the upper half. And I would also take this CoverGirl brush and just sort of blend out the other parts. I'm going to leave my cheeks for now because I want that to be a really defined looking cheek. Alright, so for the eyes, we are going to be using these two palettes because of these purples, because we're going to stick with like the purple tones today. And so we're going to start off with the primer, which is my Hard Candy Eyeshadow Primer, which has a more nudish tone to it, which will kind of help with the eyes. And with this look, like I said, because of it being a halo eye or a spotlight, you don't need really any definition. Okay. So with this look, I'm just going to use a lot of fluffy brushes that will help kind of blend things out because this eye does not require a lot of, I guess, shape and definition. So I'm going to start off with this Real Techniques Expert Concealer Brush, even though I think it works better as an eyeshadow brush. And we're going to go in with this Maybelline City Mini Palette in Graffiti Pop. And we're just going to take this light berry toned. And then taking this Wet n Wild eyeshadow brush with no product on it, we're just going to blend out these purple edges. And we're just going to take that same color and just sweep it on the under eye because we want it to tie in together. And then taking this dual eyeshadow brush from Walgreens, I'm going to be taking the fluffier end and going in with that darker tone purple here. More than likely, I think I'm just going to use this palette and not both since I don't see a need to. And we're just going to pack on a darker color along the crease. And using the other end, going back over with the regular color and just blending everything out first. And then we're going to take this Black Radiance Eye Appeal eyeshadow in the shade Eyeful, which is this really stunning purple tone. I'm just going to take this flat-edged fluff brush. We're just going to use this to kind of cut it along the center of the lid. And you know what you're thinking, it doesn't look like it's very bright. Well, that's why we're also going to add a little L'Oreal Shimmerista to the center of the lid to really make things pop. And I'm just going to use a regular fluff brush with no product on it. Pack on that Shimmerista. Oh, boom. If any fallout happens, just take a little bit of this brush. Oops. If it ends up going a little too far, just sort of go around the edges with that darker color to emphasize that contrast. I guess we'll just get rid of this bake while we're at it. Oop. And then for the under eye, I'm going to take a eyeshadow brush with a bit of black and just do the waterline / under eye. And taking whatever is left and sort of define that outer ring or that inner ring. And if a little product does steer off a little, I just get a brush that doesn't have any product on it and just sort of buff it out. So far, kind of like that. You want the focus to be on the lid itself and having the colors sort of haloed around it. And even though it came pretty intense into this corner, that's when we also get like a highlight color, which I will be using this e.l.f. Blending brush and packing on one of my favorite highlighters, which is the Revolution Cosmetics Strobe Highlighter in the shade Lunar. Just packing it on that inner corner. That way it kind of diffuses that color out. And then we do the same on the other eye. So I'm definitely excited for Wednesday at my store when I get to host my makeup class, which will basically be doing this, which is showing how I do my makeup, but I'm going to be adding a little bit of a twist to it. Of showing how to do using the same eyeshadows and foundations. Only slight differences will be the contours and the concealers, however. But generally, the shadows, the brows, the foundation, and the mascaras and all will be the same. But I'm going to be showing you how to get two different looks by basically having a dragged out version versus a more contemporary version. I want to show people that even with the same products, you can have versatility and different looks. And it will be at 12 o'clock on the 17th of April at Walgreens in Moore on 12th and Santa Fe. Oh no. Oh dear. Hold up. Had a bit of a mess. Ah dear. Well, there went a lot of that product. For liners, I'm going to be going in with my Tried and True, my Get In liner from CoverGirl, and my Master Precise liner from Maybelline. Just basically the start of it. It's kind of the blessing and curse of about having a hooded lid. It's like, yeah, I blacked out my entire eye, but when you look at it straight away, it looks like a generic line. Okay. And we're just going to take that same eyeshadow brush that we had from Wet n Wild. Taking a bit of a neutral tone and just working that under the brow bone itself. Now onto my favorite part is a little bit of shimmer highlighter. I'm going to be taking two different highlighters. I'm going to take that same strobe highlighter from Revolution Cosmetics, and then taking the Master Holographic highlighter from Maybelline, which is more of this purple undertone, which I think would be very befitting for this look. And then taking the strobe. And since I'm feeling a little extra, I'm going to take that same Shimmerista with a different highlighter brush from from e.l.f. doing some minor touch-ups before I start doing the lips. All right. And for the lips, we're going to also stick with sort of the color magenta range. We're going to use these three products. The lip liner is a Wet n Wild gel liner in the shade 662D, Don't Be a Prune. We're also going to go in with the Broadway Colors Buttery Matte Lip Cream in the shade 08, First Date. And then Heartbreak from Rimmel to put on top just to give it that sort of good ombre effect. Now I should be able to do this and show you guys how I do my lips. So the first thing I'm going to do is start off with my lower lid here. That little line is where like the end of my lip will be. And then taking my tried and true Real Techniques full lip brush, all right. Dang, these are actually starting to fall apart now. Much like that so far. And now we're going to go in with the Butter Matte from Broadway Colors and just go over the lips. And then just taking this little generic angle brush to kind of fix up the edges. And then taking a little bit of that Heartbreak. And to darken the edges of the lips just a tad, I'm going to take that same dark shadow tone. Pretty much kind of like that. Just a little touch up there. And then also just to be safe. Now on to my lashes. So I use a custom pair that I made, which is like 3 lashes stacked in one. I believe it is 2 of the Ardell's Ardell 251s, which were the weird ones that have the straight edges and sort of fluttered edges, and a mix of the Ardell double ups. Starting with my right eye, I use the Kiss brush on adhesive, just a little good amount on the lash band. And then of course you wait for it to get tacky so that way you don't put it on wet and it would end up shifting around or messing up your eye makeup. And then the same verse as the first. And then generally I wait about a couple seconds before I start putting on the mascara. And then for mascara, whoops, I'm going to be going in with two of my favorites. One of my newest favorites is the Volume Saint mascara from Black Radiance. Uh-oh. Looks like the lash came undone. There we go. And then going in with the NYX Badonkadonk mascara. Just to really push these babies together. And then for the final piece de resistance, my Special Heart Mule. And then right there would be the finishing touches of our face. So this is my Spotlight / Halo eye with a good mauve purple mixture with this fun lip. And a darker contour to show a little more definition. So I hope you guys enjoyed our video today. It was really nice seeing y'all again. And remember, stay you, stay beautiful, and always be yourself. Love you guys.